Hello, good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. I'm John Drummond, your host for the next 60 minutes. Thanks to you, TNT Show and India Live are growing and delivering more exciting projects. You can watch the TNT Show, for instance, on indialive.net. It's streamed out to YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter. Plus, on YouTube, you can view all the previous 160 odd shows. Well, if you're upset by media coverage of political events where journalism is junked in favour of stenography and perhaps rehashed news releases, or worse, where conjecture and hearsay replace facts, if you're looking for an alternative voice, well, you found it. We're here for you. Please be here for us and do support the Crowdfunder. You'll see the details on the screen. It's been another great week for British democracy. The Labour Party may be able to lay claim to be the first prospective government to renege on its promises before getting into office. For example, it's likely to roll back on promises to help the disadvantaged, and it may also continue with the Rwanda shambles. Well, which is very topical because the first victim of the Rwanda Act apparently was seized today and is on their way to that fine country, which is juxtaposed to the Congo, where there's a genocide apparently taking place. I gather that somebody from the Congo will not be repatriated to Rwanda, despite qualifying for that odious move. How they establish these facts and how you can justify sending people to what effectively could be very close to a war zone. We also have the ridiculous situation in which the Tory government has now spent more on affordable housing in Rwanda than it has spent in the UK. On a more positive note, the Scottish government, we gather tonight, has won the vote of no confidence. That said, it's rumoured that the Alaba MSP Ash Regan voted with the opposition. If so, it would be good to know the reason. Come on the show, Ash, and tell us if you didn't vote, if you voted with against the vote of no confidence or with the vote of no confidence. We'd love to know the reasons why, and we'd be happy to give you some airtime to do that. Well, tonight we'll be talking to a special guest, Tony Cox. He'll be discussing the upcoming Independence March this Saturday in Glasgow and much else besides. This is a rare opportunity to hear from somebody who is fully plugged into the independence movement, who really knows what's going on there and is in touch with a whole range of folks right across the board and doesn't take any particular partisan view on any of those things. You'll get an open-minded discussion, if you like. And you'll be taking your questions live, so there's still time to put a question. You'll see the details on the screen. Or as you know, the TNT stands for The Nation Talks. So in some respects, this is your show. We're live and we're free, so no license, no problem. Now, to our guest tonight. Thanks for joining us, Tony. How are you?
I'm very fine, and a pleasure and a privilege to be on your show, John.
Oh, it's our privilege and our pleasure. Tell us a little bit about the march to begin with, Tony. What's happening? Who's headlining it? How's it taking? Where is it taking part precisely? And how do people join in?
Well, the march is actually the 10th anniversary march for All Under One Banner. They've actually been involved in campaigning now for 10 years non-stop. I mean, they should be given medals for the work that they've done. I mean, I can't claim any credit for that because I'm a kind of Johnny-come-lately on the National Committee. I only came on this year. But I've always been a supporter. I've always been involved in All Under One Banner marches and rallies. Not them all, but it's a rare privilege to actually be on the National Committee of All Under One Banner, and I'm just delighted to be a part of, and any help that I can actually offer, I'm delighted to contribute in any way. But the march is marking 10 years since Indy. So this is obviously a symbolic opportunity to actually take stock, look at what has actually transpired over the last decade. What is the position of Scotland at the moment compared with a decade ago? What were the promises that were actually made in the immediate aftermath of the India ref back in the summer of India in 2014, and how do they actually stack up? What are the consequences of actually continuing with the union under the present circumstances, and what are the opportunities open to us in terms of the independence struggle? So basically, it's a 10-year march, and the 10 years since then have been marked by all kinds of major issues, but we've chosen to actually highlight the issue of Gaza as an opportunity to actually pull the indie movement together. There was quite a lot of discussion in the National Committee about this, and we felt that this was an opportunity where the indie movement could actually unite. That this was an opportunity because we are non-party political. We don't hold a brief for anybody, and I've seen quite a lot of rumours and claims on Facebook and on social media that somehow, all under one banner are an anti-SNP or anti-Scottish government, and for that reason we shouldn't be trusted. Well, let's get this straight. SNP representatives have been at every single rally I think that we've ever done. I can't think of a rally where there wasn't actually an SNP.
And is this a rally on a Saturday?
It's a march and a rally, John.
So you have speakers, I take it?
Yes, we're more speakers than we've had at any other event, which is going to be a bit challenging for me in terms
So
of.
who do you have, Tony?
Well, we've got Robin McAlpine from Commonweal, a well-kent face within the indie movement. We've got Yvonne Ridley, again,
Yes.
from the Alpa Party. We've got Robbie Mockery from the Scottish Currency Group. And I think that's a particularly relevant in terms of looking at the whole financial and fiscal situation with regards to Scotland. We have Mick Napier from the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and he'll be a keynote speaker, probably the keynote speaker, along with Isabel Lindsay from Scottish CND. We've got Kenny McCaskill as well from the Alpa Party, and Alison Thewlis representing the Scottish National Party. We just received notification that they'll be sending a speaker just a few days back. So, we've got a very,
tell us what the program is like. When does the march start, and when will people be able to hear these speakers?
Yeah, well, the march, people were asked to assemble at Kelvin Way, Kelvin Grove Park, around about 11 a.m. From 11 a.m. and the march is due to start off at 11:30, and it will make its way to Glasgow Green, the traditional setting for radical marches in Glasgow, and we're due to try and get things going by 1 p.m. and probably be over by 3:30, 4 o'clock, around about that kind of period of time. So short and sharp, which means I'll have to bear my tails. I'll not be able to yatter away as sometimes I do.
How do you persuade politicians to be brief?
Yes. Well, you don't. You basically tell them to shut up without fear or favour.
You control the mic. Is that how you do it?
Oh, well,
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with being verbose from time to time. Scots have a reputation often for being over succinct, and that's sometimes not a good thing. It's if you look at other countries, people are encouraged to sit up and speak up and be assertive.
Yeah.
And there's probably some lessons there for most Scots to say, look, that the way things are about being hiding your light under a bushel is not any longer appropriate.
Well, I couldn't agree more, John. I couldn't agree more. But we're living in this kind of instant gratification, instant fix, soundbite kind of culture. I mean, we try and cut across that. and we do, our rallies in the past have featured some terrific contributions which have been thought-provoking, intellectually challenging, and I have no doubt that Saturday will be the same. I mean, we've got a high bar to actually pass. We set up a high bar last year at the demonstration last year in May in Glasgow Green.
Yeah.
Over 20,000 people. Now we're hoping to exceed that this year.
Oh, really?
But we'll see. I mean, all the indications that we're getting from social media is there seems to be a bit of a momentum building for it. That seems to be what we're seeing online. Now that might be just a false impression. All those people that we're hearing from, hundreds and hundreds.
Let me ask you the critical question. What's the weather forecast for Saturday?
It seems set fair, which would be unprecedented. Unbelievable last year. Like the 4 demonstrations last year. I mean, it was like, the Book of Revelation. We were waiting on the frogs landing,
Yeah.
I mean, we had wind, we had searing heat that almost claimed the silent Klansmen in Stirling. The wind and air was absolutely incredible. The rain in Glasgow was torrential, and it went 2 or 3 steps above that in sky.
Yeah.
So we've been through it. So I don't think I've ever actually chaired an all under one banner. Well, no, once in Aberdeen, the weather was quite good, but hopefully
that's once in 10 years.
once in 10. Well, yeah. No, I've been chairing them for 10 years, only just for the last year. But the other thing, just to interject here, that I got asked to mention was the issue about stewards. We are looking. We've got quite a lot of stewards, but we are looking for other stewards. So anybody that's actually watching that would be interested in volunteering, just basically turn up at Kelvin Way, check out anybody with a high vis yellow jacket and ask to speak to the chief steward, and they'll set you up with instructions and probably put you with a more experienced steward.
Yeah.
But we would be very grateful if people.
So who should they ask for? What's the
chief
name
steward?
of it? What's his name?
On the Glasgow, it's Keir McKechnie.
So should ask for Keir?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. We've got different chief stewards at different events. See, I'm the chairman. I mean, a lot of
This sounds like talking to the post office now. I'm the
chairman. Absolutely. Pass the buck.
Okay. I have no idea why all these people committed suicide. I've just no idea. They just did it.
Yeah.
But
you just ask for the chief steward. It's Keir. I'm pretty sure it's Keir.
I understand. Let me ask you a general question then. As you look around, you've got some great speakers lined up, which is super. And you've got a nice cross-the-board approach that encourages people to get involved, and because they should enjoy the speakers. Because these are people who've been around for some time, they know which end is up, and they should be able to sort of talk meaningfully about various issues. I gather that one of the points you want to address is Grangemouth. Is that right? You want to talk about Grangemouth?
Yeah. Well, particularly myself. I mean, I come from an engineering background, and I come in from the labour and trade union movement.
Yeah.
So, and also, I'm very, very interested in the whole issue of the question of colonialism and how it relates to Scotland. I mean, this is a debate that I've been carrying on with Labour Party socialists, Communist Party people, basically the kind of George Galloway line, Palestine's a colony, Ireland's a colony, always a colony apart from Scotland, that line, I just think is absolutely not no basis. With every passing year, that argument just gets.
You might want to dig out. Oh, by the way, I gather the chief stewards are Gordon McCrae and Keir McKechnie.
I apologize. Aye, they're both of them. Aye.
Yeah, the whole thing is interesting. I did a column for the Sunday National in which I talked about colonialism, because at that time there was a big pushback against Scotland being described as a colony. And one of the arguments that was used by those who opposed the whole notion of colonialisation was the fact that the Scots are represented at Westminster. So they said, well, you can't be a colony if you're represented at the main in the Imperial Parliament. And my point was, yeah, but so is Ireland.
Yeah, exactly.
Ireland had MPs. They had the MPs for 100 years, almost in Westminster. It didn't do one iota of good, really. I mean, they had to make the decisions back in Ireland in the end. That's the nature of colonialisation.
Well, I mean, I think the issue of colonialism in Scotland is a really interesting question from a historical point of view. I mean, my own feeling is that the British colonial method of empire building would have been absolutely and utterly impossible without the experience to get in both Scotland and in Ireland. And that basically the British method of empire building owed an awful lot to both, but in different circumstances. So basically, what you get in the Irish context is this mailed fist version of colonialism, whereas in Scotland, it is very, very much more of a velvet glove, working with and very closely with local collaborators. And I think you can see that with the Scots bourgeois that was emerging in the 18th century. I mean, they made common cause. It was an Anglo-Scottish project, the British Empire, and it still is. It still is. The Scots bourgeois, unlike bourgeois industrial ruling classes in many other countries that basically.
Actually, let me just push back on that one a little bit. That's what you described did happen, but it wasn't unique to Scotland. I mean, the same thing happened in India. There was lots of
that's precisely the point. That is precisely the point. I mean, the point I would make. That is precisely the point, John. Actually, the method of empire and the method through which Scotland was actually turned, a part of the union, partner, and it was a partnership between ruling classes, not between peoples. That made India possible.
There's also another connection.
The conquest of India possible.
There's also another connection, perhaps, and it links to free ports, which was that for a long time the Westminster government outsourced colonization. I mean, it was in India. It was the East India Company. Prior to that, it was the East Africa Company. This is so that slavery could be conducted in East Africa without necessarily.
The Royal African Company.
Yeah, the Royal, without the fingerprints, the government's fingerprints on it, and the same thing in India. But then, of course, there comes a point where a limited company just cannot operate on the scale that was needed in India, and therefore you had, even though it had its own army, which was bigger than the British army, eventually you have to call on the state to support you. Otherwise, you go bankrupt and stuff like that. And
they were state actors. Yeah, they were state actors. I mean, the East India Company was a state actor.
Yeah, and now we've got an interesting connection with free ports, where, as we discussed on an earlier show, it looks like there might be vast chunks of Scotland controlled by corporations.
I mean, I've noticed people in Salvo actually raising questions with regards to the free ports and raising the question as to whether this actually goes against the Act of Union, and using that argument, I think, also and probably be more force with regards to the contracts that have been given to the corporations with regards to the energy companies, and the access to Scottish waters and things like that.
It's a good point. I've never quite understood the precise nature of the usefulness of pointing out that the Act of Union has been broken, because there is no overriding authority. I mean, it's not like the Good Friday Agreement, where you can pull in the United States and perhaps the United Nations and say, look, this was an international treaty over which you have oversight. And I think that, in the case of Northern Ireland, has constrained the British government in many respects. I don't think there's any such constraint. I mean, so what? Who do you refer yourself to? I mean, what do
Yeah,
you,
well, that, yeah, precisely the point. Yeah.
I mean, what do you do? I mean,
But I think at the same time that these points actually have to be made, because I think what they actually do is they underline that we are very much in a colonial situation. You know,
it's an interesting one,
that
because
would be my view.
I watched Keir Starmer being interviewed, and he was asked two questions. One was, is the union voluntary? And secondly, what can Scotland do if it
Yeah.
decides voluntarily to leave? And he answered yes to the first one, and he answered nothing at all to the second one.
Yeah, of course he's not got any answer, is he? You know,
What he should have said.
we are the mother of all parliaments. We are the greatest democracy. We are going to hand down lessons to the entire world, you know,
Yeah,
about democracy. China,
yeah.
how dare you? You know, every country in the world, the lecture, and we actually see what's actually happening within Britain itself. And I think actually, you know, a lot of folk within the indie movement, there's a lot of heads in that doing at the moment. They're like, oh, you know, things aren't going our way, and a step back. And you
Yeah.
actually take a more international perspective, and you actually see the position that Great Britain PLC is actually in. And let's face it, if we're saying that the Anglo-Scots, the Scottish elements of the Scottish bourgeois were junior partners in the British Imperial project, then basically Britain is very much a junior partner in the American Imperial project. And look how that's going, and look at the impact that that's actually having, you know, on, you know, with regards to sanctions, the war in Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East. I mean, the point that we've got to be making to people over this whole issue with Gaza. Well, what's the relevance of Gaza? What does that mean? You know, I've heard that a couple of times for folk. Well, the relevance of it is that if we remain within the Union, we're actually remaining within a war state, a forever war state. They're actually talking openly now about bringing back conscription, about moving towards wartime economy, you know, attempting to try and beef up at this stage, attempting to try and use Ukraine as you know, as a battering ram against Russia. But what the message that we're getting is, if we stick with this law, then we are actually saddled to a war state, a state that is basically intent on forever wars right across the globe. And it's not just in the Middle East, we're also talking about Taiwan and getting pulled into that. I mean, how many wars do we, you know, are we going to allow ourselves to actually be hauled into? It's absolutely imperative that Scotland goes in a different way. I mean, you know, the situation that we have at the moment in Gaza, it's crying out for international diplomacy. But we see with the pressure that's actually being put on by the Americans and the British on all the European states. You saw Switzerland basically capitulate in its traditional historic role as the world's arbitrator, you know. And we see Geneva now, you know, leaves, you know, going through the streets of Geneva. Now, that, in my mind, actually presents a brilliant opportunity potentially for an independent Scotland. We could step into the diplomatic space vacation. We could
Hold on a second, Tony.
international terms.
Honestly, as you move your head, I'm afraid your mic gets disconnected.
Oh.
So
Yeah,
the rhetoric is good, the movement isn't so good, because you've got a loose connection there, I think, between the whatever, who knows.
Is it breaking up? Is it breaking up?
You're fine now. You're absolutely fine now. But
all right, I'll
in
try and not move my head.
in the recent past, we were losing you once in a while,
Right.
particularly when you moved your head and stuff. There, but the interesting thing is that you mentioned Taiwan. I'm not sure that will actually necessarily go much further, because it would mean two empires would then be confronting each other, which would not be a good thing. I mean, the Chinese empire right now, what they've worked out is that you can actually achieve a lot more with soft power than you can with naked force, which is why they've built this new Silk Road across right across South America and right across Central Africa. And all of that, and including reinvigorating the Silk Road between the West and the East. So, and that's just based on sheer cash. It's just based on, you need a hydroelectric dam, no problem, we'll give you one. We'll build it, of course. It might not work, but we'll build it and we'll charge you later if that happens. But
that's what they're in. They're trying to do business with the world.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely correct. They're using soft power. But what we see, I mean, it's a bit like the British Empire 70, 80 years ago. What we're seeing is basically the end of the American empire. And there are elements within within America who are not prepared for that to happen. Yeah. And as I say, and if anybody's, what's he banging on about that for? What's that got to do with Scottish independence? Well, it's got an awful lot to do with it, because as I say, Britain very much is very willing, in fact, to go much further than the worst neocons within America in terms of their belligerence. That's the case in Ukraine, but we see the way that they're backing up the...
We're losing you again, Tony.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back now. Every time you move your head forward, we lose you.
They're backing up the Zionist war state in in Gaza, in a genocide that's unfolding before our very eyes, and just as a basic act of humanity.
Can I just test you on something else? You talked about why independence is essential, but the reality is, surely, since there's no international arbiters apart from America and China to speak of.
No, there is. There's the UN. We'll forget about the UN.
Okay, there's the UN, which is to some degree a creature of China and United States. So to whom?
No, it was a creature of Western imperialism.
Well,
I mean, the Western nations have got.
Let's accept that premise. So Scotland decides it wants to be independent.
Yeah.
To whom does it appeal? To whom does it say? Like, for example, Northern Ireland could say in an instant, they could say to the United States, you need to fulfill your obligations under the Good Friday Agreement and support us in this. And that would be
you're getting way ahead of yourself there. I mean, why would we need to appeal? What are you assuming that there wouldn't be a constitutional means, that we wouldn't be able to put political pressure on, that Westminster wouldn't buckle?
No. I'm moving one stage further. Let's assume that there's been some sort of plebiscite, referendum, vote, whatever you want to call it, and the Scottish people have signified their intention to create an independent state. In order for that state to function, it has to be recognised by the international community.
Yeah.
If, as you say, the United States and Western imperialism is opposed to changes of this nature, why would they agree to recognise?
I didn't say that they were. I didn't say that they were. I didn't say that America was.
So you think the United States would recognise Scottish independence?
Yeah, I think they would. Yeah, but I think that this is the issue. I mean, the US would, I think, be compelled to actually recognise.
Why? Why would it be compelled?
But for international reasons, the way that would actually look, and also remember the millions.
Run that past me again. Why would the United States be concerned about the recognition of a small state in the edge
why
of
do you think that? Why do you think that they're putting pressure on Israel now? All the discussions that are going on behind the scenes, there's basically major divisions actually opening up within the American, between the Americans and Israelis. There's huge pressures getting.
Sorry, how does this act to the benefit of Scotland?
The point I'm making to you is that America can actually be put under pressure, and that they do react to pressure from out with themselves.
Hold on a second.
Let me finish making a point, John. The reason why they're putting pressure on Israel and on a Netanyahu over the whole issue of Rafah and all the rest of it is precisely because they're facing pressure for the international community. Do not underestimate this. The world is changing, and America actually has to take cognizance of that. This idea of America, even the British Parliament, to grant us independence, we'd have to ask for their permission. No, I don't believe that would be the case at all.
Well, no, leaving the Westminster Parliament aside and accepting that an independent state would need to be recognised by major powers.
How we're actually going to get there first,
Yeah, okay. But let's
way ahead of yourself.
Let's just explore this. We're still losing you once in a while, Tony. Let's assume, okay, the Scottish people will vote for constitutional change. I still don't understand how the US would be compelled to recognise the new state. Sorry, we've lost you again. You're gone. You
got me now?
Yeah.
It would be the force of international opinion, John. I mean, I'm not sure where this question, why. I think we should cross that bridge when we come to it.
Okay.
Have a much more detailed discussion about what that possibility. But
Tony,
if we get a plebiscite,
you're going to have to hold. You're going to have to hold the mic thing, because it's every time you move your head, pretty much it disappears. No, it's not working.
Working now?
Yes. Right. Okay, let's junk that for the time being, or maybe completely. Tell us what you think as you look around the political scene in Scotland. What's your evaluation? Lost you again. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
I think it's the switch. It's a bit. Is that better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
All right.
Yes, I was asking if you could give us a tour de horizon of how you see the Scottish political setup right now and what your thoughts are on it.
Well, I mean, the thing is, the indie movement, I think, is a bit of a crossroads. The whole issue with regards to Nicola Sturgeon, the situation with COVID, coming out of that. We are actually a bit of a crossroads, and it's difficult to say where the Westminster elections. That's the next thing that's actually on the horizon. My own feeling is, as I suspect, and polling evidence suggests that there has been outlying polls, that the SNP will take a hit. But within the indie movement, I mean, that's the situation with the SNP. But my major concern is much more with, the wider indie movement, the independence movement per se, as a whole. And there's important moves along the lines of looking towards the pulling together of the different tendencies and groups within the independence movement, under the auspices of a convention, a convention of the indie movement, and give up. I've been basically hoping that would actually happen for a long time. I mean, when we were in Dundee in 2014, the first thing that we did on the day after the independence vote is we started preparing for what we described as a Red Yes rally, and that was an attempt to bring together all the different independence groups, whether they were socialist or not, an attempt to try and establish a permanent committee or group within Dundee and it met with a certain, the event itself was big, but it broke up. It broke up on the basis of, political differences and personal differences in that as well. But my own view was that that was the actual way forward, and why we haven't had an overarching body that can actually bring together the independence movement is anybody's guess. It's well overdue. And my regard and support for All Under One Banner was because in the absence of a constitutional convention or whatever you want to call it, bringing together the wider India movement, All Under One Banner was that umbrella organisation, in terms of campaigning. And I think we need that again, and I think we need to bring people together, and we have to have a real discussion about where we are, what the real situation is, and what the tasks are facing us. Because, my position is, John, that the fundamental issue, and it's the elephant in the room in every discussion, about Scotland, is the question in deindustrialisation. I mean, deindustrialisation has been basically, if we describe the Industrial Revolution as a revolution, then what we can see is deindustrialisation has been a counter-revolution. And that deindustrialisation, the experience of that for the last 40 years, has been like battery acid in terms of the social, cultural and economic framework of Scotland. Scotland has been reduced, it's being hollowed out. And that is an act of colonialism, which is done in the neutral language of free market economics. And fundamentally, it is a colonial act. Now, we've never had any settlement as a result of deindustrialisation. There's never been, this is why I think Grangemouth is such a crucial issue and a crucial campaign. Because what Grangemouth is actually going to go through in the next few years, as the reality and the consequences of that closure actually develop and become apparent, is they'll face the same experience as Fintry and Dundee, as Craig Miller, or Tory Glen, of all the different schemes, Abbeyview and Dunfermline. You could count them off. Places that have actually been hollowed out, had their industry taken away from them. The whole economic basis of those communities has basically been destroyed. And those communities have been left largely to fend for themselves over the last 40 years, in the absence of anything to actually fill the vacuum that was created through deindustrialisation. And I put that fundamentally down to a British state absolutely and utterly controlled and dominated by neoliberal cowboys, the riffraff that comes through the public school system in England and up here, basically imposing their spoilt brat view of the world on the rest of us.
How could they do that, Tony? How were they able to do that?
Well, through the so-called Thatcherite revolution, through divide et impera, through a whole number of means.
Well, she was an agent of it, you could argue, but how do the Tories manage to attain power and keep it?
Well, the fundamental thing was actually the destruction of social democracy, of the Labour Party at a national level in Britain. Not the capture of the Labour Party, and it's basically transformation into what it is now. That process has been entrained since Kinnock. A lot of the reason why socialists like myself left the Labour Party was we were pretty much invited to leave in the starkest of terms, and there was a takeover went on, and I would argue that a similar process has actually taken place inside the SNP. It happened back in the 90s to a certain extent, but after 2014, the SNP is chalk and cheese now compared with what it was in 2014.
So,
do you remember in 2014 when the SNP its membership absolutely exploded? and they did nothing with that membership. They were, but I think some people within the SNP at the top of the SNP were very, very scared of all these new members actually coming in. So I think a job has been done on the SNP to a certain extent.
Okay, let's just examine that for a second. So the SNP has an election coming up. Which of the so-called declared candidates would you prefer to see as leader?
I mean, it's not my party.
Well, that makes it easier for you now.
Well, I mean, I would probably, it would be somebody like Alison Thulis, but I'm not sure her hat's going to be in the ring. I don't even know who the candidates are, to be honest.
But she's an MP. She would have difficulty standing.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
So there's no one that would meet with your approval?
No, off the top of my head. You're putting me on the spot here. I mean,
is there anyone you wouldn't like to see? I mean, for example, what about Kate Forbes? Would you like to see her as leader?
Well, I mean, I think Kate Forbes actually got a hard time of it, and I admired the stand that she took on gender issues. But in terms of her economic, her economic outlook, I've got major misgivings. Her support for free ports. But that would be true of any SNP candidate. I mean, remember, I'm not in this to either, I mean, I'm an independent supporter. I'm not an SNP supporter. I mean, that doesn't mean to say that I haven't voted SNP and campaigned alongside them and had good relationships with people within the SNP. I mean, Stuart Hosey was my local MP, and I had a lot of time for Stuart Hosey. A lot of people probably raise an eyebrow at that because, I mean, I'm red in tooth and claw, and you can probably say about Stuart Hosey that he isn't. But I recognise that Stuart had a lot of very good capabilities, particularly in terms of his grasp of economics. And I think at heart, he was absolutely and utterly sincere in his demand for independence. I saw the way that he reacted when we failed to get it. But I mean, that doesn't mean to say that my friendship, or my regard for individuals, even individuals of a different political hue to myself, I mean, I take an interest in what's happening in the SNP, and I'd like to see it pushed to the left. I'm a socialist, so I want to see socialists, and I mean class-based socialists.
Would you regard yourself as a Marxist?
Well, I mean, Marx.
Oh, we lost you again. Your connection is gone.
It's funny, anytime anything controversial comes up,
it's because you move, and you were explaining to us that you are a Marxist and why.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. In broad terms, I would say I was a Marxist. I mean, any socialist is a bit of a Marxist. They've got a bit of Marx in them, It'll probably scare a lot of people. But, I mean, what you've got to remember is that Marxism, all that is, it's just a way.
Oh, we lost you again. Your connection keeps going, Tony. No, I think it's a connection down below somewhere.
Oh, it's not. You know what it is? Is that it? You know what it is? The thing keeps it keeps getting caught between my body and the edge of the. It's just.
I'll tell you what it is. You have a Stalinist connection down there.
No. I mean, I've only ever been a member of the Labour Party. I've never been that's, and of course the Scottish Socialist Party. I mean, that's the background I come from.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the Labour Party, it was always, I mean, by the late 1980s, my feeling was the end of the poll tax. I had this conviction that there would be a move towards independence in Scotland, and that was something that I welcomed back then. And I wasn't, I wasn't disappointed. I remember the big demonstrations in the early 90s, where you had Alex Salmond and George Galloway standing on the same platform saying the same things. I mean, I don't know what happened with Galloway. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I think maybe someone in the water down there or something. I don't know. But
well, you could argue he's just seeking the main chance. It's very difficult. I mean, if you declared yourself a Marxist in England, that your chance of being elected was just about the square root of zero.
Yeah.
So no doubt he has.
It's not something well, was he describing himself? I don't know if he does.
Well, at one time he sounded as if he was a socialist. I'm not sure he sounds that way anymore. He sounds fairly right wing sometimes when I hear him talk about immigration. But maybe I misheard him.
Well, I mean, just because you're concerned about immigration doesn't mean it makes me make you a racist. I mean,
of course not. No, I didn't suggest he was a racist. I just simply suggesting he didn't.
Or right wing. I don't believe it makes you right wing. Trade unions are concerned about. Remember what trade unions are about. They're about labour supply. You can only keep your wages up if you keep the labour supply. You know, and there's a great, you know, I mean, what is the situation with wages in this country? Wages have remained stagnant and dormant and actually are losing value. And that's at the same time as we're seeing massive increases in migration. And basically, that is part of a neoliberal economic pattern, you know. So inward investment, very cheap wages, you know, and no trade union rights, things like that. And this is basically the pattern that you would see with free ports replicated.
I'm interested. I just wonder when you look at, say, an independent state, whether it be Scotland or otherwise, you would prefer that state to be socialist.
Yeah, of course.
And where the control of resources is held in public ownership rather than private ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So that any organizations that employed people would in turn be owned by the people who are employed. Would that be your wish?
No, they wouldn't be owned by the people employed. I mean, you know, that's co-ops. Co-ops exist today.
Would there be state control then?
No, I mean, look, again, you're getting off ahead of yourself there. I mean, there's a point about, I think before we actually discuss what the alternatives are actually on offer, what we should look at is the system that we actually have, whether it is basically sustainable. Is it actually delivering a sustainable future for the majority of our citizens in Scotland, for the majority of Scottish people? And what are the consequences we continuing with this system? Now, the reason why I would argue for a socialist system is because I believe that the neoliberal system has shown itself to be absolutely and utterly bankrupt. It's only interested in the bottom line. That's it. It's like a huge combine harvester that runs around the globe gathering up.
I think that's well understood. I think you would find it. I think.
Well, if it is understood, though, John, then the conclusion that we should draw for that is that we actually have to look at a different model, and what that model is then the question.
Yeah.
You know, what aspects of the model, but certainly public ownership. The idea of allowing our natural resources to be handled by corporations who fundamentally rape the globe on a systematic basis anywhere they've ever been.
I think the problem is fairly well understood. The question is, what is the solution?
No, I don't think the problem is well understood. If it was well understood,
well, let's say it's well understood between you and I, at least. So, what would the solution be? Would it be state control of enterprises? How does it work?
Well, I mean, again, you're getting a wee bit ahead of yourself. You're asking my personal opinions.
Yes.
But these are my personal opinions. I'm here on behalf of the National Committee of All Under One Banner. I mean, you know, I would love to have a discussion along these lines, but I'm not so sure that detailed discussion about what a socialist plan of production for Scotland would look like in a post-independence period are particularly what your viewers are actually wanting to actually listen to. So I'm a little bit,
That's okay. That's good. I did ask you at the beginning if there's anything you didn't want to talk about.
No, absolutely. But I mean, as it relates to Scottish independence,
Yeah.
not to the socialist transformation. I mean, I'm perfectly prepared to discuss.
No, you're gone again, Tony.
Oh.
Your connection's gone.
Oh, it's this bloody thing. Got it. Got it now?
That's better. That's better. It's almost like every time you move.
No, it's not that, John. It keeps getting caught between the table, and when I move forward, it clicks. That's what it is.
I'm sympathetic. I've put on so much weight recently. I've got the same problem, but getting close to the table and stuff. But no, seriously, no, it's an interesting discussion. We maybe have it some other time. But
Yeah.
but there's so if
I think what we should be focusing on is the situation.
If you were to look down the pike and say, this is the way I think independence is going to happen, how would you visualize it?
I don't really. I mean, what I want to do is I want to get in a position where we've actually got a movement that can actually achieve independence. And in order to do that, I think what we've got to do is we've got to make the case for independence on the basis of just what a disaster we're actually living through. Now, the reason why I'm a socialist, as I say, is because I think that the way in which this country is actually run is a completely disastrous, approach. Having said that, even with, Tory policies, if Scotland went independent, what I would fully expect to happen is that it would be an enormous lift. It'd be like a glacier getting lifted off a landmass, it would slowly rise up. And if you want any evidence for why I might think that, I think the situation in Russia is actually a case in point. That following the imposition of the sanctions and following the rejection of Russia by the Western world, and that meant getting booted out of the Western economic system, and all that went along with that, SWIFT and all the rest of it, what you've actually seen is you've actually seen a huge upliftment in the Russian economy over the last 2.5 years since that special military operation began. They had 3.5% growth last year, and that's in a wartime situation, and they're running at 5.6% so far this year. So it looks like growth might be even higher this year in Russia than it was last year. And that's all a consequence. The only point I'm making is to illustrate that once you actually take yourself out with that neoliberal economic system, then actually, there will be a natural upliftment. I do believe that will actually happen. But I think it can only be possible that Scotland has an economic future on the basis of a rejection of the Thatcherism that we've been experiencing for the last 40 years. That's the fundamental point, John. When you actually look at the experience of the last 40 years, it's in the last 30 years to 20 to 30 years that you start seeing this push, discernible push, and the development of a support for independence amongst elements like myself that previously hadn't supported it back in the early 80s. I did. I've always supported Scottish independence. The first campaign I ever got involved in was at school in '79 at Arbroath Academy in 1979 over the 1979 referendum. We organised the school referendum, and I think it ended up 97% in favour of independence. And immediately a massive war broke out. Well, when we heard the way the result had went, the school just erupted. They actually basically had to get the fire brigade in, the police had to come in. It just went absolutely nuts. That's how how seriously it was seen by us as 14 and 15-year-olds at the time. So the first campaign I was ever involved in was that. And I think it was the experience of Thatcherism in the 80s, and particularly the poll tax. You know, this idea that Scotland was always going to be a testing ground, was always going to be a place where basically, we would see if it worked there.
You made that point several times. Thanks very much. But how do you respond to people on the left who say, for example, look, this whole business of independence is just nonsense. The person in Grangemouth or Fife has more in common with somebody in Yorkshire than they do with somebody at Westminster. I mean, all you're doing is creating division when you should be uniting people. How
No,
do you
but
respond
not
to
though, are they? A Grangemouth oil refinery worker isn't the same as an oil refinery worker in Yorkshire. They're not losing their jobs. I mean, and let's get this straight. Can you tell me another country in the world that actually is a major producer of oil, or even a minor producer of oil, that actually doesn't have a refinery? That doesn't have a refinery.
I'm sorry I mentioned Grangemouth. Let's put that to one side. I've heard many people on the left say, look, that independence sounds very attractive, but the reality is that working class people in Fife have just as much in common with working class people in Yorkshire than they have with any notion of independence, which just gets in the way. How do you react to that argument?
Well, working class people do have something in common internationally. This is exactly the same to say, well, a working class person in Dundee has the same working class interests as a working class person in Marseille, on the left bank, or Paris, or in Berlin. I mean, we're internationalists. Scots always have been, internationalists.
I think the continuation of that argument, say Fife and Yorkshire having so much in common, is the extension of it, which is to say, look, all this stuff about independence just gets in the way. There should be working class solidarity between these different groups across the whole of the island.
Yeah, but you can have working class solidarity but still be in different nations. This is again, this cafe bar internationalism, that everyone always has to be internationalized. But there is a fundamental contradiction at the heart of that when it's coming for people within the British Labour Party, i.e. British. They're actually arguing for a nationalist position, a British nationalist position, against Scottish nationalism, or against the idea that Scottish workers might actually benefit from Scottish independence.
Yeah.
And also, no, just on that point, I mean, because I'm a historian of Scottish Labour, Labour in the wide sense. That's what I did my PhD in at university. Before that, I was an engineer, by the way, so it's not just like I went for skill to, university.
You and me both.
I went to university in my late 20s after having been involved with a militant as a political organizer and also as an engineer for quite a few years. But this is the point. I mean,
we've only got 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes.
All right.
I want to get a quick question from George Wands. He's saying, what's so hard about saying resource-based economy with community ownership over our natural resources?
Well, there's nothing hard about saying that. If
Yeah, I think George rather anticipated your response there. But because we've only got literally a minute, is there anything, Tony, you would like to add that we haven't covered? Very briefly, please.
Well, none that we've already covered. I mean, the thing is that Gaza is a fundamental issue. I mean, the point I would make is that if we want to get out of forever wars, then we have to unhitch ourselves from a state and a ruling class, a British ruling class, which is dedicated to maintaining its own privileged position within the world, hanging on to the coattails of America and creating wars right across the globe. Contrary to what you say, there are moves afoot in with regards to Taiwan. That's all we can expect is war without end from this British state.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Tony. I appreciate your time, and thanks very much. It's been very educational, I have to say. Thank you a great deal. And I hope the
Cheers.
march was a huge success on Saturday. I'm going to make a few concluding remarks. If you could stick around, I'd be grateful. So there we are, folks. Another great show. Thanks for joining us. A big thank you to all of you for watching tonight. Hope you've enjoyed it. As ever, we have a formidable list of guests lined up, so look on independencelive.net for details, and look out for our show next week at the same time, which features a special surprise guest. And remember, as we say every week, the world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. So to all of you, thanks for joining us. Stay safe, take care, and please, please, please check out the Crowdfunder. Good night.